This is Coping with Coronavirus. I'm Jeff Curran from Energy Live News, and I'm joined by Michael Phelan of GridBeyond. Hello, Michael. Hope you're well. How are you and the family in these uncertain times?
We're doing fine. None of us have caught coronavirus as yet, and just getting used to this new way of living. I guess being isolated quite a bit from other people, and that is strange, but I guess it's the way things are at the moment. It
is quite weird, isn't it? But it sounds like you're keeping safe, which is good.
We are, yeah. But it is very strange.
Yeah. And how about the team at GridBeyond? You're in 4 different offices, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, so we were used to working, I wouldn't call it remotely, but we were used to working in different offices and collaborating together. And that has very much helped us in the current climate, in that we would have had weekly meetings, we would have the ability to work remotely, and that we all have laptops, and we would use all the facilities like Teams and Zoom and all the various things to allow us to basically have a weekly cadence and catch up, and then people can catch up on a daily basis if needed. So we run scrums, for example, for software development, we run sprints, various things, fairly structured way of allowing people in different offices collaborate, which is the type of thing you need in this particular instance as well when people are working remotely.
Oh, it sounds like you're well prepared, actually.
Well, yeah, in a strange sort of way, we were actually prepared by the fact of working through and having a number of offices. It greatly helped us with this.
So in terms of, hasn't affected you so much from a working perspective, but how's it affected you, this whole situation, in terms of you, your customers, etc.?
So I suppose in both UK and Ireland, we're seeing an effect in terms of, in UK, a lot of companies have furloughed their staff and shut down their premises. So obviously they're not using power at the moment. So that power is not available to us. So that's resulted in a very significant reduction in available load and therefore revenue to us in the UK of the tune of 40%. In Ireland, it's probably a bit lower. They probably haven't furloughed staff, so staff have stayed much more closely associated with companies, and therefore are still working maybe more effectively in those companies. So maybe we're down 20% in Ireland, so on average about 30% down.
So is that how GridBeyond effectively makes its money, through energy flexibility?
It would be the bulk of what we do. So we gather flexibility from industrial and commercial clients, and we put it into short-term markets to help with the balancing of the grid, to allow renewables onto that grid.
So then quite a difficult time for you, and obviously quite a difficult time for your customers as well.
It is, yeah. It's quite challenging for them now, and will be obviously quite challenging in terms of coming back, having been cut off for a certain period of time, in terms of lost revenue and still having the bills, I guess, associated with having the business there on the ground while not operating.
I mean, in terms of, we've touched on that sort of big challenge around the revenue. Is that the main challenge? Are there any other challenges that you're needing to look at?
That is definitely the main one. From the point of view of keeping the power plant running, we're a critical infrastructure, so our people are allowed to help to maintain systems. Interestingly enough, we're probably the last system to be called before the hospitals actually have to look after themselves and use their own generators, and sometimes we even use their generators. So we are an important part of the resilience of the grid in both UK and Ireland. So we've continued to operate and make sure that we do our part, I suppose, in keeping the power on.
Well, that's really interesting, actually, from a healthcare system. So for the team and you, it must be quite a nice feeling to feel that you're helping the effort.
Yeah, it's very important, and it's very important, obviously, that they don't necessarily have to turn on their emergency generators and things like that at this time. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, and at least, as you say, do our piece to try and keep the whole show on the road.
And in terms of then your other sort of industrial and commercial customers, probably much more difficult times for them. Are you able to help? What sort of advice are you giving them?
Yes, so there will be quite big opportunities for them on the way back. We still would be working with the ones that aren't furloughed in the UK, from the point of view of the opportunity that's there to participate in the balancing markets, so the frequency response markets. The capacity markets are starting to come back again in the UK, which is again a lift to them. There's a lot of work they can do in terms of capacity reduction, general tariff reduction, especially with the changed environment we have at the moment, the falling energy costs, etc. So we are working on all of those aspects, I guess, with them, as well as providing them with some help on reducing energy costs in the first place, using efficiency measures and operational equipment effectiveness and the likes.
So actually, at this moment in time, you're helping them to reduce costs, which is obviously something that they really could do with. And then from a future perspective, actually, let's ask that first question. So really, at the moment, it's about helping them to reduce their cost and make sure that they're not at risk in any way around their energy.
Yeah, pretty much. They're more interested in the schemes that can be brought to bear that would bring additional revenue to them. So things like frequency response, things like capacity, things like do us and try it avoidance for the next 2 years in the UK, and things they can do around smart tariffing on one side, and then anything we can do to reduce energy consumption by using, say, some smarts and forecasting their energy and maybe optimizing between gas and electric and that in their sites. So that's their primary interest at the moment. I guess in the longer term, they'll get back interested in renewable assets and in generally investing in assets and even looking at EV again. But in the short term, with the fall of cost of energy, they're not so attractive. So solar obviously has a certain cost, the battery has a certain cost, EV has a certain cost, and oil prices are on the floor. So the economics of those have been affected, and probably financial confidence, if you like, has been affected as well by in particular, the fall in oil and fall in demand for electricity.
Interestingly, we have a sister publication to Energy Live News called Futurenet Zero. So interestingly, that what you're discussing there around renewables, is your feeling that post-COVID-19 that renewables and net zero is going to be a difficult thing for companies to look at?
I think it's more of a delay than necessarily a difficult thing to look at. I think what will happen is we'll see about a 6 to 12 month delay when confidence is possibly low. People aren't investing in the same way, in particular in renewables. Maybe to a lesser extent, the business case for batteries and grid resilience is damaged, but not as much. I also think for EV, it will probably slow it down a little bit because the economics, again, won't be as strong. But I think in the longer term, oil prices or generally prices will come back, electric prices will come back, consumption will go back up, and then you'll see a recovery. And I think people will go back onto the path of wanting to decarbonize the world and not have other crises caused by maybe climate change.
Okay, let's look at once we get past the sort of the worst of the situation. Are you advising customers at the moment? Are you waiting? And what do you think the likely advice would be?
In the short term, it's very much around just bringing them revenue, getting them back on their feet, and bringing any energy consumption plans to bear that would save them money. In the longer term, I think we will be looking at resilience again, if there is a case for them putting in batteries, if there's a case for solar, if they should be looking at corporate PPAs for renewables and things like that. But I think it's definitely delayed by a few months. I think the primary interest of most of our customers just get back on their feet and get back going again. And anything we can do to reduce their costs and mitigate the hit they're taking at the moment financially is what they're looking for.
Yeah, no, so I mean, it's absolutely a massively difficult time. Do you see any positives that will come out of the COVID-19 situation that we see ourselves in?
I suppose some of the benefits might be in the area of how people work, their ability to work remotely, their ability to cooperate even remotely. I think people might look at resilience as well. I know National Grid in the UK there are looking at resilience from the point of view of what do they need when they have a lot of renewable and maybe less thermal generation. So the UK grid at the moment would be operating probably with higher level, and Ireland would be the same with higher level of renewable than would normally be the case, because the load has fallen, the demand has fallen, but the renewables are still at the same level. And the thermal generation then needed to balance is less. So you actually have a larger balancing problem. So it's just bringing forward the situation of higher renewables on the grid. So I think that's one kind of maybe unforeseen benefit of the whole thing, that people are becoming more comfortable with dealing with large levels of renewables on both grids and balancing those.
Okay. I think we're nearly done, but I always like to leave with something which is a positive thing, especially as this is all about coping with coronavirus. So let's have a positive thought. So Michael, if there's something that you could, for whether it's your team members, whether it's your customers, or even just generally people in the energy industry, well, give us a positive thought that we can end with.
UK has a lot of flexibility and storage already there on the grid. It can very much benefit for grid services and help to balance the grid. People should look at that and look at that with companies like us and help gather some money to help with the recovery. There's quite significant money in terms of pounds per megawatt available for this, or thousands per megawatt, basically. So it is really something people should look at.
That's marvellous. Look, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.